Hello everyone, my name is Haley Elizabeth, and if you don't know who I am, I post videos pertaining to a little bit of whatever I want. True crime, conspiracy theory, vlogs, and all things spooky, scary skeletons. So if you're into any of that, you can subscribe, and if not, totally fine, like no hard feelings. We're just here to, listen to a little bit of true crime, do our makeup. I put clips in my hair today instead of a regular headband because I felt like, I don't know, switch it up. I've always been super insecure about my ears, but you know what? My ears are my ears. Like, I'm literally going to die with them. I might as well cover them up as much as possible. But before getting into the rest of today's video, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Now, if you guys don't know what Skillshare is, Skillshare is an amazing website that offers classes from anything you're interested in. They have creative writing, photography, business, music. Now, if you guys remember from a while ago, I mentioned how I was like getting really into drawing comic books, and I took actually a class from Skillshare on how to draw comic books. And so I decided to take one of the other classes taught by the same teacher, the absolute king, Ira Marks. He has a wonderful class called Concept Art, Drawing Imaginary Worlds, and I absolutely love this class. This class has taught me so much about creative blocks and also how to pace myself in the creative process to make sure that I'm not burning myself out too quick. Skillshare is also learning focus, so you don't have to deal with any of those annoying ads to disrupt your creative flow. They also have classes ranging from all different experience levels, such as beginner, intermediate, and experts, just so you know, no matter where you are in your creative process, Skillshare is helping you out. And Skillshare is actually giving the first 1,000 of my subscribers who watch this video right now a 1-month free trial by clicking the link down below, so you can start your creative process today. I absolutely love Skillshare. I use it all the time, like unironically. It has become one of my favorite websites. I think it's so helpful, and even when you're using it, it just makes you feel so productive. Like, learning a new skill just makes you feel so good. And if you are the first 1,000 people watching this right now, congratulations. All you need to do is click the link down below and get your 1-month free trial to Skillshare. So again, thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, and now back to your video. That's all I need to say. So without further ado, let's just hop right into it. There's a lot to get through. Girly Chu Hazenkopf was born on August 27th of 1963 in Malaysia. She was born into her parents Chu Ching and Chin, as well as her sister June and her brother Andrew. Girly growing up, she was a very, very sweet child, extremely polite, had very, very good manners. She would have a really good impression on anyone that she came in contact with. She just had a very nice vibe to her. In 1984, when Girly was 21 years old, that is when she got a job at a bank, and it was actually at this bank where she met one of her very, very good friends, Susan. They had this thing where every year it was like an annual trip where they would travel to the US, more specifically California. In 1990, on Susan and Girly's annual trip, they decide to go to SeaWorld, and at SeaWorld is where Girly meets her soon-to-be lover, Diazian Hasenkopf. Little bit of backstory on Diazian. I don't know if it's Diazian or Diazian. I'm just gonna say Diazian because that's just how it looks like it's pronounced. So I'm gonna explain Diazian's backstory. Diazian Hasenkopf is, first of all, not his real name. His real name was Ahmad Chavez. He was born in Houston, Texas on May 5th of 1965. He had 3 other siblings, but when he was 8 years old, that is actually when his parents split up and he was told to live with his father and his stepmother. Diazian kind of didn't have a good relationship with his stepmom, so much to the point where at just 16 years old, that is when he decided to leave home just to get away from his stepmom. As Diazian was in high school, he actually suffered a really bad head injury from playing football that ended him up in the hospital for around 4 days, and a lot of people that were like around him during this time said that ever since that happened to him, he was just not the same afterwards. He ended up attending Notre Dame University, and here he majored in chemistry, and that is also where he met his very first wife, Rosemary Guerrero. Rosemary and him ended up getting married quite quickly when Diazian was only 23 years old. His first marriage is kind of like where the birth of his lying ways embark. So basically on the marriage certificate, he said that he was a lab technician, but in fact he wasn't a lab technician, and he only did school part-time, and then he had a part-time job at a hospital. Nonetheless, in 1987 he would graduate from Notre Dame with his bachelor's in chemistry. Shortly after he graduated college, him and his wife at the time decided to try for a baby and ended up actually getting pregnant. He said that he needed, you know, more space to raise this child, kind of like a fresh start. So that is when they decided to pack up their things and move to California. When moving to California, Diazion just got very odd. They had high hopes of him entering into a medical school, but since his grades in college and high school weren't really that good, it was very hard for him to find a medical school that actually accepted him. He had a lot of anger issues when it came to raising the kid. He didn't have a lot of patience. She actually started to see him take blood from himself, but never really questioned it. She just kind of assumed that maybe he was doing a lab for school and needed like a little bit of blood. But now looking back at that, that makes like no sense. Since he did have anger issues, he would then say a lot of scary things to Rosemary, and one of the scariest things that he did say to Rosemary was something along the lines of like, if I wanted to get rid of you, I could just dump acid on you and you would be gone, because he was like a chemistry major. So he was, I don't know, this man was like in his Walter White era or something. She eventually started to slowly distance herself from him and also their child as well. And there was also speculation during this time period that he was cheating as well. So that was just, you know, one more reason for her to get up out of there. In July of 1990, that is when he got accepted into the University of Utah College of Medicine. Since he was living in Utah and his family was living back in California, this was kind of an opportunity for Diazion to basically start up with his fake stories. He would just lie like all the time for fun, and it wasn't even like a good type of lie. You know, like you go to Starbucks and you say a different name because like it's fun, but he would literally tell people that he had the cure to cancer and he was going to be a billionaire one day. He also told people that he had a wife and a kid, but his wife and kid actually passed away a couple years ago in a car crash, and he felt super guilty about it because the mother was actually driving to pick him up from work. And everybody kind of believed him. They were just sitting there like, okay, Ahmad, like literally who asked? His professor one day kind of got suspicious of what Diazion was telling the other students. So he decided to do a little bit of research and found that there were no records of his wife or his son ever dying. He also went a little snooping through Diazion's textbooks as well. He found romantic letters from his wife and child back home, basically saying like, keep up the good work in college, we cannot wait for you to come back home, and all this stuff, meaning that they were like very much alive, and Diazion was just saying these bizarre and fake stories for no reason. He was also a really big manipulator as well. There was a couple times where like the students afterwards, when talking about Diazion, they said that Diazion had actually manipulated them into giving vials of their own blood to Diazion to do specific tests with them. Early of 1991, that is when he was actually dropped out of his medical school. Diazion and his wife back home were actually in the middle of a divorce, and the divorce had just been finalized. A week later, he was kicked out of his medical school for a bunch of things. He falsified a letter of recommendation in order to get into the college, falsed a grant saying that he was married when in fact he wasn't married, just to get more money from the college, falsified lab results, and he scammed 2 women into giving him thousands and thousands of dollars for his cure to cancer. He's a con artist, he's a liar, he's a manipulator. In 1991, while he was freshly divorced, he had just been kicked out of school, there was really no one around him that cared enough for him, and then that is coincidentally around the same time where he met Gurley. And when he introduced himself to Gurley, he didn't introduce himself as Ahmad Chavez. As I said, he would dabble now and again with fake names. He introduced himself as Diazion Hassankopf. Immediately when they met each other, they hit it off right away. They had a lot in common. Even when Gurley went back to Malaysia to go home, they would frequently send letters back and forth to each other. In 1992, the following year, that is when Diazion decided to pop the question and ask her to marry him, and then by the end of 1992, if she would be willing to move out to New Mexico with him, more specifically Albuquerque. It's a very big deal to ask the parents for their blessing. In this case, Yazian did not ask for her parents' blessing, so he wrote a letter to the parents basically apologizing that he didn't ask for their blessing beforehand, but frankly, he doesn't care about their blessing because he loves her so much, and no matter what her parents had to say, he was going to marry her either way. And also in this letter, to basically like tell the parents that she's in good hands when she moves all the way to New Mexico, he said that he was born in Switzerland and his intelligence grew bigger than any other kid in his grade, to where he started having to skip many grades. He also said that he worked for NASA, and on the side he was a surgeon and would perform surgeries in third world countries for people that couldn't afford it. Because of like this huge resume that he basically just gave the parents were like, whoa, this guy is a dream, and he's single. July 17th of 1991, that is when Diazian legally changed his name from Ahmad Chavez to Diazian Hassankopf. She ended up moving in with him, and then in the summer of 1992, that is when they bought a house in Albuquerque, New Mexico, since, you know, he had promised all of these things to keep her financially afloat. You know, he worked for NASA, he was a surgeon, he had all these degrees. To fulfill these promises of financial stability, obviously he didn't even finish med school, so there was really nothing for him to do there. So what he decided to do instead was to start scamming people. He would tell people that he had these cancer treatments that would basically cure your cancer. He would also try to sell his anti-aging serums, and surprisingly, a lot of people fell for this, and he ended up getting over $100,000 in investments. He would also tell people, which was so odd, he would also tell people he invented a machine where you could map out the entire human genome. And when he was telling people this, oh my God, you made that? Where is it? Can we see it? And he said, well, actually, the government found out that I was trying to make it, and then I didn't want them to like take my invention, so I split the invention in 5 different pieces and put them over 5 different universities, so it's completely hidden. Like, even if you try to look for it, like, you can't. Like, it only I know where it is. Okay. When he moved to Albuquerque with Girly, he started lying to their neighbors as well. He told all of his neighbors that he was a scientist and that he was very smart. He was on the brink of being a billionaire. And he also told people this fake story similar to the story that he told in medical school, where he had a wife and a kid, and then that wife and kid actually died in a car crash, and his wife that was driving was actually going to pick him up, and he felt so guilty. And all the neighbors are of course like, oh my God, that's so sad, getting all this sympathy. He's like, yeah, I know, it's really sad, and it also sucks that I have cancer too, and I probably only have a couple months to live. He told all of his neighbors that he had leukemia, only had a couple months left to live, probably, but that's why he was trying to find the cure to cancer. Maybe he could try to cure himself and save all the other cancer patients in the meantime. You're a great guy, Diazian. He's like, yeah, I know. Even though he's lying, he's literally lying. Like, he does not have leukemia. His wife and child that he had is very much alive. On December 28th of 1992, that is when Diazian went out and bought Girly a $7,500 engagement ring. On January 8th of 1993, that is when Girly and Diazian got married. Diazian would go out and work when in reality he was just out there scamming people all day, and so Girly kind of felt like she didn't want to be at the house all day. She would get bored, so that is when she took up a job at a bank similar to the one that she did when she was in Malaysia, and that is where she met her best friend Ernie. Her and Ernie were very good friends. They would also spent holidays together. Oh my god, I totally forgot to mention this, but in 1988, Diazian was only 23 years old at the time. He actually picked up a job to be a private chef for like this super wealthy woman. After 2 years of working with her, he actually attempted to poison her vegetables in order to kill her and try to get some of her money. The woman luckily survived the poisoning and was so convinced that Diazian was the one that poisoned her vegetables, but when the police were looking around in the house, looking around in the food, there was really no concrete evidence to prove so. So instead of like pressing charges, because she was clearly very, you know, scared of him, but instead just fired him. 1993, literally less than a year of these two getting married, there is a newspaper ad for a lonely rich woman that was in need of a lover, and Diazian actually replied to this newspaper ad and ended up meeting up with this woman. He introduced himself as Dr. Hasenkopf and that he was a surgeon, he was a scientist, and the woman unfortunately actually had breast cancer. Diazian decided to tell her that he himself actually had leukemia, but he had the cure to cancer, but the medicine is still in his bloodstream. So if he takes his blood and puts it into her blood, there is a very, very good chance that it could cure her cancer as well. The cost of this treatment was $25,000 each month for 20 months, and by the end of the 20 months, her cancer will be cured. I said Diazian was like a really big manipulator. He could basically get people to do whatever he wanted. The woman agreed to pay $25,000 a month for 20 months for this cancer treatment. Top of all of that, the more and the more Diazian met up with this woman, he would basically tell her all these fake stories. He had a wife and a daughter that died in a car crash. He kept a piece of hair from his daughter that he was going to use to clone his daughter, but the sucky part is that he doesn't have a house to raise his daughter in. All he has is a little apartment, which he did not have. He literally had a house with his wife. The girl, feeling bad for him, she decided to buy Diazian a 2-story suburban house for him to raise his clone daughter. The son of this woman ended up like, you know, getting very worried for his mother because she was basically just taking treatments from this like guy that she met on a newspaper ad. The son eventually convinced the mom to go out to a real doctor. The doctors had unfortunately told her that her cancer was not getting better, but instead doubled in its size, and she only had around 6 to 18 months left to live. The son wanted to get Diazian arrested. He wanted to press charges. Because this woman had been so manipulated by Diazian, she didn't want to press charges or anything. The son just settles for a restraining order. The woman had unfortunately passed away. Diazian was very scared that if the, you know, woman is no longer alive, that maybe the son will try to come after him, come with a lawsuit, try to arrest him. He packs up all of his things and tells Girly that we're moving because I don't like this house. I just want to choose another one. So they go and they move to a different house that's literally like right down the street from their old house. Now, this is not the first person that Diazian had scammed this badly. He was like cheating on Girly all the time. He was scamming people, all these like vulnerable, sick women. He was basically just taking all of their money and running. There would be times where Diazian would be out of the house for like days and up to a week at a time. He would just tell Girly that he was going out to third world countries to perform surgeries, and then he would come back home and be like, honey, Africa is beautiful. Said that he performed like life-threatening surgeries on all these women and children just to make him look a lot better than what he actually was, when in reality he was like staying days and up to a week at his other girlfriends and like fiancés' houses because he was dating around while married to Girly. In this new house that he had bought down the street, he actually had a specific room that nobody was allowed into. It was locked 24/7. He basically told Girly that she couldn't go in there because in there it had a bunch of like top secret information from NASA, and so if she were to see something that she, you know, wasn't supposed to see, she could be at a big risk for NASA killing her. During the year of 1996, where Girly and Diazian tried for a child, ended up going to the doctor. It was revealed that Girly could not have children, and this was very, very devastating for Girly because, as I said, said, Girly was a very maternal person. She was very sweet, very polite, very gentle, soft-spoken. She was just 100% like motherly material, and the fact that she couldn't have a child, it was very, very tough on her. She also didn't want to adopt either because of Diazion's leukemia, and that she didn't really know how much time she really had left with him. So instead of adopting a child, they just decided to adopt a dog. Until one morning, Ernie, remember Ernie, Girly's best friend at the bank? One morning, Girly goes over to Ernie's house at like 7 in the morning, which already is very, very odd. And when Ernie opens up the door, Girly is crying her eyes out, basically saying that the dog had died right in front of her eyes. And the dog kind of looked like they were choking. A lot of people speculate that maybe Diazion had poisoned the dog. Nonetheless, the dog had passed away, and then a couple days later, to make Girly feel better, Diazion adopted another dog. This dog ended up running away. Diazion was watching the dog one day, and then when Girly came home from work, he revealed the news to her that the dog had escaped from the backyard, which, you know, made Girly even more depressed. So one day, he comes home to make Girly feel better, and he doesn't come home with a dog. He comes home with an actual baby, 3-week-old child. He basically tells Girly that this was his child, and he had this child with another woman, which 3 weeks old. They've been married for like 3 years at this point, so it clearly proves that he was cheating during this marriage, but she just kind of looked past that detail, told Girly like, yes, this is my biological son. The mother didn't want him anymore, and I felt so bad, so I just had to take this little boy under my wing, and like, I want you to have this baby. Girly, of course, grew very, very attached to this baby, and they ended up naming the baby Dimitri, raised the Dimitri as her own. In reality, who this baby actually was, it was in fact Diazion's, but he was having an affair with this woman that lived in Japan, and this woman ended up getting pregnant from Diazion, but she had to go back and live in Japan. She had this baby was 3 weeks old. Since Girly really wanted a kid, and Diazion wanted Girly to have a kid, he basically flew all the way out to Japan and told the mother, I just found out I have this really bad disease, and I probably passed it down to the child, and the only way to cure this disease is to do the treatments that we have back in the US. Really, really good at manipulating people. The mother then agrees to hand over her 3-week-old child to Diazion so the child could be cured of the disease, which, by the way, there was no disease. He lied about the entire thing. He had no disease. He was perfectly healthy. Summer of 1996, that is when Diazion starting up an affair with the hairdresser. She just fell in love with Diazion as soon as she met him because he was single, he was a doctor, he was funny, he was charming. He told her that whole fake story about how he had a wife and a son, but then they died, and oh, woe is me, when in reality, none of that happened. And after 3 haircuts, that is when Diazion asked the hairdresser out on a date. She said yes, and from there they were dating. He actually met the hairdresser's kids as well. She had 1 daughter and 2 sons. He would basically perform physicals on her 14-year-old daughter for her sports and stuff like that. All Diazion would do, he would sit down the girl, tell her to take all of her clothes off. When she would take off all of her clothes, Diazion would just look at her and be like, okay, you're good. Like, put back on your clothes. Like, everything's fine. Like, I'll sign it off. And that was it, which watching documentaries and stuff like that, I never saw people back it up and say, hey, what was that? I don't know what he was doing, but that's basically how he would perform physicals. And then the hairdresser actually came out afterwards, like, to the police and stuff. She would see him inject himself 3 times a day. Whenever, like, she would ask, like, hey, what are you injecting inside of you? He would always say that it was morphine to help with the pain of his leukemia, which he had no leukemia, so you can kind of already like speculate what the injections actually were. One day when Diazion was asked to watch her 2 sons for a little while, the mom came home talking with her 2 sons who were 10 and 12 years old at the time. Diazion had actually taken some of their blood to see if the boys were a bone marrow match. Of course, course, doing something like this is extremely invasive. Your 10-year-old comes up to you and says that like a guy you've been seeing took some of their blood. Why? Like, why would you put a needle in my kid without telling me first? Immediately when she heard this, she freaked out on Diazion. He was just doing it because he just needed this bone marrow match. He basically manipulated her into forgiving him. I don't really know how Girly found out, but Girly found out about the hairdresser and Diazion. So Girly went to the hairdresser and basically told the hairdresser, my name is Girly, I am Diazion's wife, we have a house together, you need to watch yourself because he is a very scary person, and if you don't leave now, like, he might do something to you and your kids. Of course, hearing all of this information, she goes up to Diazion and confronts him about it. Hey, are you married? And he's like, no, why would I be married? I'm with you. She's like, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. And then he asked her where she got this information from. And she was like, oh, you know, just someone randomly called into the sports clip and said it. Like, I don't know, maybe it was just a prank call or something. And Diazion went home that night and basically confronted Girly. They got into an argument and Diazion actually ended up physically abusing Girly over this incident. And after that, that was kind of the start of the physical abuse. January of 1998, Girly and Diazion had been married for about 6 years now, and by this point she's just getting fed up, she's tired, done with the lies. She decides to go into the locked room that she's not allowed into because one day he had just like left it unlocked, snooped around in this room, and in this room she found who the real Diazion Hasenkopf was. She found a bunch of romantic letters from various women. She also found a bunch of restraining orders as well, 3-page documents from an attorney and the FBI talking about the 1988 poisoning situation. She also found out about the fake cancer treatments by looking through like all of his computer logs, the fake anti-aging serums, how he ended up killing a woman due to his fake cancer treatments. Also found out about his real name, Ahmad Chavez. He wasn't a real doctor. He didn't even make it through medical school. He did not work for NASA. He has never really worked full-time at a hospital before. He also had 4 different social securities, all with different fake names on them, as well as fake degrees, and he also had a bunch of fake doctor license, again, all with like different fake names on them. Girly is like kind of freaking out. She's panicking because she had been married to this guy for 6 years and she's just now finding out who he actually is. She decides to confront Diazion about all of this. She knows he's a fake doctor. She knows about the fake treatments. She knows everything about Diazion. And with Diazion's anger issues, the number one thing that he would get angry is people who questioned his intelligence and people who didn't show him enough respect. In this situation, I think that since Diazion was caught in his lie, it meant that he wasn't intelligent enough to keep it from her. He put the anger that he had for himself onto Girly. He ended up physically abusing her. Physical abuse did not just like stop there. It was a every other day sort of thing. A lot of people ask like, oh, then why don't you just leave? Like, it's not as easy as just leaving, especially when the person that you're messing with is someone like similar to Diazion, who could find you very, very quickly, who could try to kill you if you try to leave. It just seems like the safest option is to just keep going back and putting up with it because you're scared to do anything else. And that's exactly how Girly felt in this situation. She felt like she really had no choice but to go home every day. On January 17th of 1998, again, Diazion was very drunk one day. He decided to take his anger out on Girly in the kitchen, but randomly, they had like a tenant living with them. And this girl was named Shelly. When she heard all of this commotion going on in the other room, she decided to, you know, check it out and see what was going on. And when she walked into the kitchen, she saw Diazion have Girly in a headlock and was punching her repeatedly in the face. And so she started freaking out, and Diazion just continued abusing Girly as if Shelly wasn't there just staring at him. Shelly ran out of the house and she went went straight to a next door neighbor's house named Pedro, told him what was going on. Pedro rushed over to the house, and when Pedro walked into the house, he saw Diazion push Girly into a bookshelf. Pedro was able to break up the debacle, and as soon as, you know, Girly had some free time to run, she ran straight to Pedro's house, called the police. The police showed up and arrested Diazion. Diazion was charged with domestic violence, aggravated battery, and assault on a house member. But since he, you know, had money, as I said, 7 hours later, he posted bond and was able to be set free and basically just went right back home to Girly. She really had nowhere else to go. I mean, her entire family lived back home in Malaysia. She didn't really have many friends or people that she could go to. That summer, the summer of 1998, it was around the time where the hairdresser started to kind of distance herself away from Diazion. Diazion decided to move on to someone else, and one day when he was looking through the newspaper, there was an ad for this woman named Julie who was very wealthy and she was lonely and looking for a lover. And so then Diazion replied to the newspaper ad. Julie actually lived about 3 hours away from Albuquerque, so they never really saw each other very often, but they did talk a lot over like email and stuff. He told Julie that he had a PhD from Cornell, 2 masters from Stanford. He was born on a Swedish ship. He had level 22 government security. He had a wife that died in a car accident. When the wife was taken to the hospital, it was actually the same time that Diazion was taking his shift at the hospital, so he had no choice but to operate on his wife, and he tried his hardest and hardest, but he could not save her, and for that he lives with the guilt until the day he dies. Mind you, none of that happened. There is not a single detail in that story that happened. He didn't exclude the fact that he had a child named Dimitri. About a week and a half later, after talking, is when Diazion decides to take a 3-hour road trip with Dimitri, so Julie could not only meet him for the first time, but meet Dimitri for the very first time. Diazion told Julie that Dimitri was actually one of 12 genetically engineered children. Diazion's sperm got 12 different women pregnant, and those pregnant women were taken through a series of tests so that the babies were born all in just 1 month. All 12 of those boys are extremely smart and developing way too fast. Whilst they are talking, that is when Diazion decides to bring up his anti-age serum. He works for the NSA. The NSA had given him all of these anti-age serums that is supposed to cost $32,000 per injection, but he tells Julie, like, you know, underneath the table, I'll give you the injections for only like $3,500. That's like a 90% discount each injection, so a couple times a month, and we'll do that for about 6 years. What do you say? And Julie agrees. He gives her these fake treatments and he starts getting money from her. On January 24th of 1999, Girly and Diazion were just sitting down on the couch watching TV, and then all of a sudden, Diazion weirdly asks Girly if she could pick him up a restaurant menu from the Hyatt Hotel and make sure to take the expressway when you go. So she agrees, and then a couple minutes go by and Diazion randomly gets up and he walks over to the garage, and from the garage, Girly starts hearing an alarm go off. So she gets up to see what's going on. In the garage, she sees Diazion basically trying to loosen the screws on her tire. So when she drove really fast on the expressway the next day, her tire would like fall out and she would hopefully crash. She basically catches Diazion in the act and says, "What are you doing with my car?" And so they get into an argument. Diazion, as I said, he tended to get like a lot of anger issues when it came to people undermining his intelligence, and so since he was literally caught in the act of doing something, he grew a lot of anger and tried to abuse her. She was luckily able to get away. She pressed the garage door open button and was able to slip underneath the garage door, and she ran straight over to Pedro's house. Pedro and his wife let Girly in. Diazion is trying to kill me. They call the police and the police are on their way. away. While Girly is sitting down in the kitchen with Pedro and his wife, there is a knock at the door, and it's assuming it's Diazion. So Girly goes and runs and hides, and as soon as Pedro opens up the door, Diazion pushes Pedro out of the way and onto the floor, and he starts screaming, "Where is Girly? I know she's here." Obviously, Pedro and his wife says, "I don't know what you're talking about. She's not here. I just want her to know that I never want to see her again. She's never allowed back in the house. She's never allowed back in my life. I don't want to be with her anymore." And he leaves. And when he does leave, the police show up and they escort Girly to the house to collect all of her things. When she got to the hospital, it was said she had multiple cuts, abrasions, bruises, and at the top of the medical report, it said, "Husband tried to kill her." Right then and there, no one saw that as weird. No one said a thing. They were like, "Oh, typical Tuesday," and then didn't do anything about it. Girly was like, finally able to get away from her toxic relationship, but the scary part about it is that she was still very, very scared of Diazion. She was very scared of the things that he was capable of doing. So when she got her brand new apartment after moving out of the house, she did not tell a single soul where she lived except for one of her co-workers named Jessie. She didn't even tell her parents. She didn't tell her best friend Ernie. She told absolutely no one because she didn't want to run the risk of Diazion figuring out where she lived. Girly and Jessie were very, very close, kind of, was her big brother in a sort of way. And so he was actually the one to help Girly move into her new apartment. And so that is the reason why he was the only one that knew where she lived. Late January of 1999, Diazion has Dimitri now because for some reason, and I don't know why, they never took Dimitri away from this household. The mother is getting abused every single day. The abuser is the father. The fact is that Dimitri was still there, and since Girly wasn't there to take care of Dimitri, Diazion needed to come up with a plan to get Dimitri out of the house. He then contacts Julie, the girl that lives 3 hours away. So he contacts Julie, and he basically says, "Julie, you're never gonna believe it. The NSA found out that I was giving you all of these anti-age serums for a 90% discount, and they're furious at me. And all of the serums that I gave you are worth $1.8 million. So the NSA told me that if I don't give them $1.8 million, they're gonna kill me. And they're also gonna kill all of the 12 boys. Julie, you have to take Dimitri." So he goes over to Julie's house. He drops off Dimitri, and he's like, "Thank you so much, Julie. I'm so sorry. Like, I have to figure out how to get $1.8 million or they're gonna kill me." When in reality, none of that happened. The only reason he wanted Julie to have Dimitri is because now without Girly in the house, there is no one else to take care of Dimitri. And so since Diazion doesn't want to take care of Dimitri, he performed this whole theatric to convey to Julie, like, "I need you to do this." Julie takes Dimitri for about 2 weeks until Diazion comes and picks him up and says, "All is good. Everything is paid off. You can continue paying me for the anti-age serums." February 9th of 1999, that is when Girly received her temporary restraining order against Diazion. She had to tell all of her co-workers and her boss about her abusive and scary ex-husband. She didn't want to run the risk of like Diazion calling the bank or showing up to the bank and none of her co-workers really knowing who he is. Her work was very, very understanding. They made sure to take care of Girly. Whenever she was done with her shift at the bank, somebody would always walk her to her car. She was such a sweet and amazing person. She was always the light. Like, she had positive vibes to whoever she met. Since she was such like a good employee, she was always on time to work. She always told her coworkers, "If one day I show up late to work, call the police because Diazion has done something to me." In March of 1999, that is when Girly had to terminate her rights to seeing Dimitri. For some reason, the courts didn't allow Girly to have full custody rights of Dimitri, although all of the abuse was happening on Diazion's end. The court just thought it was like smarter to give Dimitri to the abusive father rather than the mother. So then they settled for joint custody. But even with joint custody, that means like every holiday, every weekend, Girly was going to have to see Diazion at one point, and she didn't want to see Diazion at all. She ended up having to terminate her rights to seeing Dimitri, which absolutely broke her heart because she loved Dimitri so much, but she just was fearful for her life. Girly did have a restraining order against Diazion, but there were so many instances where Diazion had broke that restraining order. One day when Girly was coming out of her apartment building in the morning to go to work, her windshield was smashed. She knew, that means he knew where she lived. There was another instance where she was parked at a red light and he went up to her window and started screaming at her. There was also multiple instances where he would call the bank that she worked at, beg and beg to talk to Girly, but they would just repeatedly say like, Girly's not at work today, da 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 da. He would also walk into the bank as well and demand to see Girly. Even though like he did have a restraining order, the restraining order was doing absolutely nothing. He just saw the restraining order as a little piece of paper. Like he didn't take it seriously at all. May 1st of 1999, that is when Dimitri and Diazion went to go visit Julie, and Julie said that when they visited this specific day, Dimitri just looked very off, as if he was drugged, and she found this very odd, but she didn't really think too much of it. She was like, okay, well maybe he's sick and he just took some medicine. Mind you, Dimitri at this time was 3 years old. And so then a couple days go by, and that is when Julie decides to drive all the way out to see Dimitri and Diazion. Basically, they go up to his garage. Apparently has level 22 government security. So he goes up to his garage door and he pretends to like punch in a specific code, but the code isn't even like an actual code box on the garage. It's literally just the garage remote, and then he tapped the open button to open up the garage, and that was like the secret code. She was like, okay, like that's a little odd. When she actually went to his house, it kind of just seemed like he was a normal dude. Very normal security. He didn't really have all of like this crazy stuff that he was claiming to have. He also claimed to be like a millionaire, but when you went to his house, it was just like a typical suburban 2-story house. May 8th of 1999, that is when Julie went to go visit Dimitri and Diazion, but when she went into the house, she saw Diazion on the bathroom floor, and when she walked in, there was blood all over the bathroom, saw needles on the countertop, and he basically said that he was taking out some of his blood to give to the 12 boys. As you can start to see, like Diazion has a really weird obsession with injecting blood and taking out his blood. I don't really know, and no one really knows why he did that. Drank it, or maybe he did something with it, but he was very fascinated with injecting and taking out blood. In this same trip, because she was staying there for a couple days, she catches Diazion on the computer, and on the computer he's talking to 2 different women, and Diazion is offering the women the same exact thing that he offered Julie. Typically, you know, $32,000, but I'll give you a 90% discount and make it $3,500. All you need to do is pay $3,500 a couple times a month for 6 years, and you will look like a newborn baby. When Julie saw this, she was like, okay, this guy is clearly a scam. He's a con artist, because all of this combined, she just felt really, really odd being there, but she mostly stayed for Dimitri's sake. June 15th, Diazion calls Julie, hey, can you watch Dimitri for a couple of days? And she says, yeah. She said that when she went to go give Dimitri a bath, she saw bruising on his temple. He had a swollen rectum, a rash on his pelvic area, and needle marks on his toes. Diazion was either drugging Dimitri, make him stay quiet if he was crying or something, or even worse, taking out some of Dimitri's blood. So immediately she called Albuquerque's social services, and when she confronted Diazion on the issue, he basically just made the worst excuse ever. He said Dimitri was playing this game, take a little like pinpoint prick at his toes. She doesn't buy it at all, so she thus tries to keep Dimitri for as long as possible, but unfortunately, before social services witnesses could actually really do anything, Diazian came to pick up Dimitri, and then that was basically the end of that. Till July 8th of 1999, Diazian was charged with 3 counts of violating Gurley's restraining order, but for some reason, and I don't know why, he got absolutely no penalty for like violating his restraining order. I think that was more of just like a warning, like, hey, don't think we don't know, because we know. We're just not going to do anything about it. Whilst this time away from Gurley, Diazian started to get really big into conspiracy theories and aliens. Diazian started to attend UFO conferences where he met a woman by the name of Linda Hennings. Linda Hennings was engaged at the time, and she was really big into like UFOs and aliens and conspiracy theories. He basically told Linda like all this insane stuff about how he's a doctor and how he had like a wife and a kid, but they died in a car crash. He also told her that he was a 10,000-year-old alien. Also said that he had leukemia, as well as kind of like spreading the word around the UFO conferences about his anti-aging serum. Just within 2 weeks of Diazian and Linda meeting each other, Linda dumped her old fiance and got engaged to Diazian. Because of this, Linda's family grew very worried for Linda, because this was very random. Her family decided to hire a private investigator to look deeper into Diazian, and they basically found everything. Real name, they found that he wasn't even a real doctor, that he almost like killed someone through poison. The FBI was on him. And Linda was just so in love with Diazian that she didn't even care what her family said. Said that even if it's true, I don't care if it's true, because I love Diazian so much and I know that he loves me. Diazian's newfound life with Linda, he needed somewhere to put Dimitri. So he went to an adoption center. Diazian walked in there and tried to gain sympathy from all the adoption center people looking to, you know, put my son up for adoption. I have leukemia. It's life-threatening. I don't have that much time to live. I'm also a single dad, recently divorced. Of course, you know, they believed him at first until they did an extensive background check and realized that he was going through a divorce, but that was because of all of the assaults. Also did a physical exam of him and found out that he did not have leukemia. He was actually quite healthy. They took Dimitri from him anyways and didn't really say much after that. Diazian was kind of like how he was in medical school. He would just basically tell people all these crazy lies and then expect them to just believe him. He also said that he can tell the future, and in the future, specifically in 2007, the aliens were gonna come down and take out 2/3 of the world's population. Whenever people would question him on these things, like, hey, you say you have all these degrees, where are your degrees? Oh, if you can tell the future, then like what's gonna happen like an hour from now? What's gonna happen 5 minutes from now? Diazian couldn't do this because he didn't have any powers, but every time people would question him like that, question his intelligence, him and Linda would become extremely defensive, like, oh, you just don't get it. September 10th of 1999, Gurley had shown up late. This specific day, they not only didn't have Gurley show up, but Ernie actually called the bank that morning and asked if they had heard from Gurley, because typically every single night they would always talk to each other on the phone until they fell asleep. From the times of 7 to 10 p.m., Ernie had constantly tried to call Gurley, but there was absolutely no answer. Kathy, that was Gurley's boss, she called Gurley's home phone number and her cell phone number, and she did not pick up. Luckily, as I said, Jesse actually knew where Gurley lived. So Jesse was like, don't worry, I'll go over to her apartment, I'll make sure she's okay. And so while Jesse was driving to Gurley's apartment, Kathy called the police trying to file a missing persons report. Now the police are like, she's been gone for 15 minutes, everyone is late to work, maybe something came up. After 4 different tries, police decided to go over there for a wellness check. Back to Jesse, who is currently at the apartment, walks into like the apartment parking lot, and he sees that Gurley's car is still there. Oh, okay, well that's great, her car is still here, so maybe she just like accidentally slept through her alarm. He walks up to her apartment door, but her door is locked. He gets a hold of the apartment building manager, and the manager unlocks the door for him. They look around the apartment and they can't really find anything. Everything kind of just looks normal. There are 3 odd stains on the carpet, but they didn't really think too much about it. They had never been in like Gurley's apartment before. Maybe she spilled something and she was trying to clean it up. As they're walking out, that is when the police get there to perform their wellness check. As soon as the police walked into the room, they got a smell of bleach, and they also noticed how the stains on the carpets had a reddish tint to them. They ripped up the entire carpet and they sent it in for testing. They also brought in like those special lights that can see blood and stuff, and all over the apartment they found specks and specks of blood. So of course in this situation, the very first person that the police are going to point their finger at is Diazion. So they go to Diazion's house, and when they get there, there is absolutely nothing in his house. There's no furniture, no clothes, not a trace of Diazion anywhere. And when they interviewed his neighbors actually said that Diazion came the day before with a moving truck and told his neighbors that he was moving off to El Paso to find like better cancer treatments, which the police already knew was a lie because Diazion didn't have cancer in the first place. So there was clearly something else going on. They also spoke with another neighbor, an across the street neighbor, that said last night on September 9th at around like 8 p.m. they actually saw Diazion. He literally just zoomed in front of his house, parked it with the door still open, ran inside of his house. He was in there for about 5 minutes and then he came back out, and as he was coming out, the neighbor saw that he was all dressed in black shoes, black pants, black hoodie. His hands were black too. His like face was painted black, but they could tell that it was Diazion by the way that like he was built. So they start looking around for evidence, and they find that Girly, the day before, after leaving work, she went to go to the post office to drop off a letter to her parents. She drove home at 7:02 p.m. She called her phone company, just like, you know, about her bills and stuff like that. And then that was the last time anyone has ever heard from her. Then following with Ernie's phone calls from like 7:05 to 10 p.m., Ernie could not get a hold of Girly. They're assuming the crime had been committed after 7 p.m. Later on that day, a rest stop cleaner was cleaning up the sides of the roads when all of a sudden he comes across a really big tarp. Since like in this area it was hunting season, he just kind of assumed that it was probably an elk or something. In the tarp, he saw that there was like hair and duct tape and blood, and when he opened it up even more, he found a bloody top, bloody bottoms, and bloody underwear. He took all of it, he brought it into town, and he showed it to the police. The police took it in for testing, and it was confirmed that the blood on the clothes and the hair was that of Girly's. When they were looking around Girly's apartment, they found an adoption paper from Linda Hennings. We should probably call her in case she's seen Girly. So they call Linda Hennings, and when they call her, she seems very nervous on the phone. She says that she's never heard of Girly. She doesn't know who Girly is. She doesn't know who Diazion is. Hangs up, and after that, they didn't hear anything from her. They tried to call her phone numbers. She would not pick up. They tried to go to her house and she was never home. So you're probably wondering, where is Diazion? If he's not with Linda and his house is, you know, completely washed out, where is he actually? During this time, Diazion had a fiance named Sherry that actually lived in South Carolina. She drove like almost a whole 23 hours to pick up Diazion, and they were going to live in her house in South Carolina. His fiance during all of this, Sherry, she actually told the police after the fact that during this whole entire road trip, he kept on injecting himself with something, and he replied that it was morphine because it helped with his cancer. She noticed that every time he wouldn't get his morphine, he would tend to shake a lot, he would freak out, he would be like talking about nonsense. On top of all of that, he kept on putting like a white powder underneath his tongue, saying that it helped with the effects of the morphine, and then he was also vomiting blood. On September 13th of 1999, 3 women, the adoption center lady, along with Diazion's attorney, because of how many times he's gotten involved with the law, he had an attorney, and the third woman was the neighbor that saw Diazion all dressed in black going inside of his house. These 3 women called into the police saying that Diazion has been non-stop threatening all 3 of them. So apparently, weirdly, the attorney attempted to adopt Dimitri, but as I said earlier, he was just given to an adoption center, so like the attorney never had any sort of custody towards Dimitri. But for some reason, Diazion kept on calling the attorney and telling the attorney that he was gonna kill her if she didn't send over some pictures pictures or something to show that Dimitri was okay, and he was basically accusing the attorney of stealing Dimitri, as if he totally forgot that he put Dimitri up for adoption just like a few days prior. With all of these threatening phone calls, they were able to trace the phone calls back to South Carolina and the exact house of where these phone calls came from. On September 22nd, he was found in his home with his fiancée Sherry in South Carolina, and he was arrested. In the house, they found guns, charcoal is to believed of like how he made himself all black, blood vials, needles, medication, as well as Gurley's ID and her address book, as well as a steam cleaner. September 27th of 1999, a really big person in Diazion's case was surprisingly this guy named Bill. Bill was a friend of Linda and Diazion's. He would frequently go to like all of these UFO meetings. Bill actually told the police that Diazion asked Bill twice to kill Gurley for him. There was no confession from Bill that he killed Gurley, but there was a lot of evidence that pointed to Bill killing Gurley, such as when they went to go search Bill's house for any sort of evidence, they found a notebook that contained a lot of like really odd things about how to dispose of bodies. Found out that he also had a cabin in Magdalena, which is the exact location of where Gurley's clothes and like duct tape tarp was found. They also found out that on the same day Gurley went missing, Bill opened up a safety deposit box with a different name and address. In the box contained $10,000 cash as well as $20,000 worth of coins. September 21st, they got all of the results back on like the DNA of the carpet, and they found that the stains on the carpet was in fact the blood of Gurley. And they also found in the carpet a bunch of random animal hairs such as cat hairs, rabbit hairs, and it just so happened that Linda had 6 cats and Bill had 2 cats and Gurley had 0 cats. So how would cat hair get onto the carpet in the first place? November 17th of 1999, Linda and Diazion were sent to prison to await trial, and while they were in prison, more specifically Diazion, what his cellmate said, Diazion would always talk about how he never completed those crimes and that he was too clever to be caught with any of his crimes, brag about himself. And same thing with Linda, she would frequently like tell her cellmates that she actually did kill Gurley and that she deserved it. January of 2002, Diazion was actually going to get the death penalty because he pled not guilty, and so then to avoid the death penalty, he said that he would plead guilty and confess to everything and tell them the full story only if he was able to serve out his life sentence in Wyoming. And so they agreed. So I think a really big reason as to why he also pled guilty is because they had so much evidence against Linda and Diazion. They found blood and spit that was an exact match at the crime scene. They found 2 guns and a ninja sword at Linda's house, and the sword actually had Diazion's blood on it. This is basically the story that he went with. Diazion had asked Bill and Bill's friend to kidnap Gurley from her apartment, take her elsewhere, and kill her. Once she was killed, they would then call Diazion, tell Diazion it's done. Diazion would go over to Gurley's apartment, clean up the crime scene, and all while this was going on, he would be with Linda packing up his house to move to El Paso so that he would have an alibi if the police ever asked him about everything. Late August, where Bill actually started to comprise the plan and put it into motion. Whenever they would go to the UFO meetings, Bill would refer to his location that he planned on killing Gurley at and putting her body at was called Tony's compound. Now, Diazion said that he went to Tony's compound once, but he doesn't remember where it's at. September 9th at 1 p.m., Bill's friend actually stalked Gurley from her work to her home. While Diazion and Linda are packing up all of his stuff, he receives a call at around 4 p.m. from Bill and his friend, and so he needs a reason to get Linda out of his house. So he tells Linda that he's feeling a little woozy and is it okay if she picks up his medicine from Walgreens. Now, Walgreens was like an hour drive there and back. Linda agreed. She went to Walgreens, and that gave him a 1-hour window to go to Gurley's apartment, clean everything, dispose of everything, and get back to the house before Linda was even there. When he got to Gurley's apartment, he saw the 3 stains on the carpet, and so he took a steam cleaner and tried to get out the stains as fast as possible. There was things thrown all over as if Gurley was like struggling to get out, so he had to clean all of that up. He realized that he needed more chemicals to get the smell of all of the blood out of there. So he quickly ran to his house, and that's when the neighbors saw him all dressed in black, and that's why he was like in a rush and made it back to his house before Linda got there. And then a few minutes after Diazion got there, Linda showed up, but Diazion wasn't done cleaning up Gurley's apartment. There was still a lot more for him to clean up, so he needed another excuse to make Linda leave. While they were at the house, he was kind of renovating the house too, like getting ready to sell it, and so he sent Linda out to go get bathroom tiles. He thought, you know, getting bathroom tiles is going to be a bit longer of a job, so he quickly left his house, went back to Gurley's apartment, finished the job, got back to his house, and then he packed up all of his stuff to get ready to move. The police heard this. They did not believe Diazion's story whatsoever because there was a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of holes with it. Number one main thing being is that if Gurley was kidnapped at 1 p.m., how was she able to call her phone company at 7:03 p.m.? Also, wouldn't make sense that the neighbors said that they saw Diazion at around like 7 p.m. They just felt like he was telling the truth, but not the full truth. But it was enough, apparently, to get him exactly what he wanted. He avoided the death penalty and spent his life sentence in Wyoming, where he is still resided at today. As far as Bill, they didn't have much evidence on Bill as much as they had on Linda and Diazion. Police truly did believe that Linda was an accomplice to Diazion's crimes, but there wasn't enough to link Bill. So Bill was only charged with tampering of evidence, and his sentence was time served with a year's probation. In October of 2002, that is when Linda's trial came up, and then at the trial, Diazion blamed everything on himself. He said that Linda had nothing to do with it and that they should not punish Linda because it was all his idea, it was all his crime. The court just didn't believe Diazion, and Linda was also given not a life sentence, but she was given 73 years. Quite recently, in 2020, Diazion actually went in front of the court in an attempt to lessen his sentence. He brought a 400-page document basically saying that his life sentence was technically illegal. I'm not really sure what the court said to that. I'm pretty sure they didn't let him like lessen his sentence at all. Diazion and Linda are still in prison. As far as Bill, he's out and about. He's literally like walking out there, walking freely. Even to this day, no one knows where Gurley's body is. Gurley's body was never found. Diazion had said how like he had dissolved her body with acid and stuff, but the police like now still, even to this day, have never recovered Gurley's body. February 4th of 2021, so like quite recently, last year, Dimitri's mother, adoptive mother, actually released a book called Mommy Number 13 because apparently like after he was given to the adoption center, Dimitri went through 12 different mothers before actually finding his adoptive family, and that was the mother that was like the author of this book. Basically, Dimitri had no clue who his father actually was until he was 14 years old. The way that she set it up too, like, oh, your father essentially murdered your mother and now he's in jail for fake being a doctor and also murdering your mother. And then he just says, oh, that's not so bad. I thought that was a little odd. And also his name is not Dimitri anymore. I don't want to like say his name because I do want to give him privacy, like let the man heal. He ended up running away from home when he was 18 years old. He basically left his whole family behind, like his adoptive family. He also suffered a lot of like trauma from when he was a kid. And then I think that's why he was so numb to like when his mom told him who his actual birth parents were. I hope that he's doing well now. He's again like 24 to 25 years old. He actually lives in Alaska now, so hopefully he's happy, he's healing, he's all good. I think this is the longest video I've ever made. I went for like a very 70s sort of look, I guess. Graphic liner with the hoops I got from the thrift store. Literally all my clothes I thrift, except like if they come from sustainable brands. Speaking of sustainable brands, Broken Planet, it is February 17th. This Saturday, Broken Planet drops their new collection and I'm so excited. Let me try to find it because I literally just saw it. I have their notifications on. I missed their last drop and I'm not missing another drop. I really want to get either a Choose Wisely hoodie or a cream colored zip up. It drops this Saturday at 2 p.m. What else is going on? Oh my god. So I made a joke a couple of times about like people who watch anime. Look who's laughing now. Ha ha ha. I just finished the first season of Hunter x Hunter. And I'm so sorry to anyone that I made a joke about watching anime. I was closed-minded. I was closed-minded and a fool, because now like I'm hooked. There's 6 seasons of it and it's so good. I'm about to watch season 2 and I'm very excited. Oh my god, last week I talked about the show Archive 81. All I do is indulge in media. Like I watch movies, watch shows, read books. Pretty sure that's my purpose on this earth. I finished Archive 81. I said last week that I was watching it. I still don't understand it. Can someone explain it to me? Because I still don't get it. I thought it was going to be a Black Mirror thing. Turns out it wasn't. It like turned dystopian sci-fi. And I think that's why it really screwed me up. Other than that, nothing really much is going on. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. And I think that's it. So with that being said, do something that makes you happy today.